All right, this one's crazy. What if I told you that there's an American company illegally selling their technology to Russia for their military to use in the war against Ukraine? That's the bombshell report just released by Hunterbrook, alleging that Ubiquiti, a $30 billion company led by Robert Pera, the owner of the NBA's Memphis Grizzlies, is, to put it bluntly, directly assisting the Russian war effort. So today we're joined by Sam Koppleman of Hunterbrook. He explains how his team went undercover, pretending to be buying this equipment for the Russian military, and how a U.S. company offered to help them bypass current sanctions.
Yeah, we can ship to Moscow too, no problem.
There's a quick 5-minute video from Hunterbrook that I'll link below that serves as a great summary for this incredible story. You'll also find in the description link to Hunterbrook's original story, their newsletter, and YouTube channel. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Sam, this one's pretty wild, man. So I know you're busy. Appreciate you taking the time, but it looks like your firm just released a study yesterday alleging that an American company is selling technology into Russia that's being used in the war in Ukraine. At a high level, is that right?
That is exactly right. We spent about 6 months investigating this company, Ubiquiti, which I know you're from Tennessee. Its CEO is the owner of the Memphis Grizzlies basketball team. And he's one of the richest owners in all of sports. He has a net worth of $30 billion. And it's all because of this company, Ubiquiti, that most people haven't heard of. Right. Except the Russian armed forces, who now know Ubiquiti and its devices all too well. And I'm happy to share how we broke the story, some of our key findings. But the takeaway is that there's an American company whose products are being used in Russia by the Russian military to aid in the communications necessary for their drone strikes on Ukraine.
Okay, so communications equipment, what
antennas?
Routers,
antennae. I mean, I'm sure some of your viewers use Ubiquiti's equipment. It's honestly pretty good. We think that's a big part of the reason that the Russian military is using it instead of Chinese options like TP-Link or some of Ubiquiti's competitors. It really helps them with their ability to connect with and navigate and track their drones when they're en route to attacking Ukrainians, including civilians.
So Russia's a big country. They have a lot of products. It's got to be impossible to keep, if I sell these pins and they get, I can't sell these pins in Russia, somehow they're going to get there, right? Like, this sounds like it's more than just a couple get smuggled over. You're talking about this is like maybe not officially licensed, but at least understood by the company.
Yeah, I can explain this a little bit to you where, there are sanctions right now on dual use goods that are not supposed to be sold in Russia because they have military applications. And so what you're supposed to do if you're a company that cares about adhering to sanctions, about avoiding violating sanctions, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to build a compliance team. And the compliance team might not catch every last router, but its job is to track your supply chain, to understand whether your products are ending up in places where they shouldn't. And look, to your point, Kim Jong-un famously drove a Mercedes. And there was a great New York Times article asking the question, how the hell did Kim Jong-un end up with a Mercedes? And so sanctions can sometimes be hard to comply with. The thing about Ubiquiti is that they almost, in an eerie way, do not care or seem to care about where their devices end up. This is a big $30+ billion company, but instead of selling all of their devices directly, they sell almost all of them through third-party distributors, some of them official, some of them unofficial. And what we did was we wanted to see, okay, how hard would it be to go get one of these devices if you were a Russian soldier? And with most companies, most major companies, especially most $30+ billion companies, it's really hard because they have compliance teams and their sales teams are trained and everyone knows not to send their devices to Russia. We had one of our reporters who speaks Russian essentially go undercover and pretend to be a member of the Russian armed forces. And he went essentially on a shopping spree trying to buy Ubiquiti devices. And not only did he get distributors from within Russia to agree to sell him devices, antennae. By the way, antennae produced after the war started within days. They said, we can get this to you on the front lines within days. We
Jesus. So
also,
they had it. They had it with them at that point. Yeah.
oh yeah. We also called up American distributors. And one of them, we have an audio recording you might want to play from our video, that they say, oh yeah, we can ship to Moscow. And then eventually they clearly speak to some compliance person. And then they come back to us and they're like, look, we can't send directly to Moscow, but knowing that this was going to Russia, they were like, we can send it to Turkey. And then you guys can get it from Turkey into Russia, knowing that Turkey is not going to block that shipment. And that's a textbook violation of sanctions. That's how people do it.
Holy
And
cow.
what we found is that this company, this wasn't some kind of aberration. We looked through trade data. That's like customs data. Like you can find this trade data aggregated in all kinds of places. And people try to keep a lot of stuff off trade data. Like they don't want to disclose all the shipments to Russian trade data. But even in the public trade data, like you're looking at the Russians' customs records, it says Ubiquiti shipments. And they went up, not down after the war. So sanctions go in place, and we found more Ubiquiti equipment showing up in the trade data headed to Russia than there was before the war started.
I just want to say it's awesome how excited you are about this. Clearly, you love what you're doing. It's coming through, man.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is,
I mean, look,
yeah.
our job at Hunterbrook, we every day just try to go figure out the truth and figure out where companies are diverging from what they're telling people they're doing. And there is nothing more exhilarating than when a company claims to be compliant, or a company claims to be doing business right, or claims to be patriotic, and you actually find that the reality is something different. And this wasn't my investigation. This was an investigation from 6 members of my team who have just
Sure.
spent months and months and months and months digging. And it's a thrill to have it out in the world. And I've got to say, we published a story yesterday. It's a kind of dense story about sanctions and Ukraine and Russia.
Mhm.
And I had no idea if anyone would care. And millions and millions and millions of people have seen this story. Tens of thousands are talking about it, posting about it. And that's the only way that companies like this are ultimately going to be held accountable. So I'm so grateful for the platform here on your show, and I'm excited for people to hear more about the story.
Yeah, man. Do you think it's that many people just don't like the Memphis Grizzlies? Is that
It must be.
orbit?
It must
That's
be.
good.
Well, look, I mean, I'm a big NBA fan, and one of the sort of wild things about the Grizzlies is that Ja Morant, their star player, kept getting suspended for doing all kinds of celebrations where he's pantomiming, firing rocket launchers and guns and all these different sort of out there, expressions of himself. Meanwhile, his owner, the owner of the Memphis Grizzlies, is helping enable Russia's war in Ukraine. And the NBA has done nothing about that so far. I think a lot of people have resonated with what feels like an unfair dichotomy between those two situations.
And there's different levels of this too. When you're talking about Russians selling products that they shouldn't have, it's like, okay, that's frustrating. We see that with a lot of stuff. But to hear that American distributors are on board with selling American products and then coaching people how to get around sanctions, I mean, that's awful, man, knowing what these are being used for.
One of the most remarkable conversations with one of these distributors was us asking for these devices. And the distributor goes, one of the few distributors who didn't just say, here you go. This distributor goes, it's going to need to be at least a $100,000 offer. We were like, why? And they were like, because this is a violation of sanctions. So they knew exactly what they were doing. And I think part of the story here, from our perspective, is that people think they can operate with impunity right now. They think that no one's going to really enforce the sanctions. No one's going to really make sure that they are accountable to their own policies. And ultimately, it just comes down to the people who buy Ubiquiti's products, to the public at large, to everyone else, to be able to say, look, enough. You can't be doing this. And I hope that one of the outcomes of this story is Ubiquiti keeps getting to sell what everyone says are awesome devices, but they finally feel like at $30 billion, they're ready to build a proper compliance team.
Do you have an idea of the volume in terms of dollar amounts?
Yeah, I mean, we were able to trace through the trade data tens of millions of dollars of these devices ending up in Russia. But again, a lot of the devices are not showing up in the official data. So it could really be an enormous amount, and it's inherently impossible to quantify because if you're sending a bunch of Ubiquiti devices to Russian war criminals on Telegram, they're not like making sure to properly mark it on the ledger.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we've got the distributors that are just out there in the Wild West doing their own thing. Clear. I mean, I love that the guy on tape is like, yeah, this is illegal, so I'm going to charge you more. It's perfect. That should go over well. When you get up to the actual company Ubiquiti, is there any way that they should know where their equipment is ending up?
So look, we spoke to a bunch of lawyers and experts on sanctions. Companies aren't allowed to just say, we're not looking, we don't want to know where our devices end up. They have an obligation, a legal obligation to track all of that. And the thing about Ubiquiti is it's a very weird company. It's huge in value, but it's small. Very few people work there relative to the money that they make.
Mhm.
And this became a problem in the early 2010s when Ubiquiti actually got in trouble, fined by the US government for its devices ending up in Iran. And at the
This isn't
time,
the first time for these guys?
no, and at the time, the CEO, they got off fairly easy. It was only like a $500,000 fine. And the CEO said, look, this hasn't happened before. It can never happen again. If it happens again, I'm going to be in real trouble. And what our piece revealed is that it happened again. And so, look, it's possible that Ubiquiti doesn't know that its devices are ending up in Russia. But what I'll tell you is our small team of really diligent and dedicated journalists was able to find videos, pictures, trade data, tons of evidence that Ubiquiti's devices are ending up in Russia. Ubiquiti, a $30+ billion company, should definitely be able to figure this out if we're able to figure it out, if they wanted to know. And so it raises the question, do they?
Okay. Is there any, and this might be outside the scope of your investigation, but any reason why this has flown under the radar specifically?
I think that people have been very distracted. There's a lot going on in the world. There's stuff
Yeah.
going on in Venezuela. There's stuff going on in China. And I think Russia and Ukraine hasn't been on the front pages in a long time. And so I think that mostly it's a company that's surprisingly anonymous, helping out seemingly with this war that people have mostly tuned out from. But it's clear from the reception to our article, people want to care about this. If they're given true information, they want to tell this story and they want to hold people accountable. But I just don't think there's been many people looking into stuff like this.
Have you heard anything back from Ubiquiti? I'm sure you reached out to them multiple times
We
before
tried to get
publishing.
their comment, of course. The problem is that not only did Ubiquiti not talk to us, they're a very sort of guarded company. They don't do earnings calls with investors, which is strange. Most public companies,
Is it public? I'm sorry. Is it a public company?
yes, it's a public company,
Okay.
and they don't do much by way of investor calls, investor relations. They've hardly any coverage from sort of sell side big banks, so they don't really talk to the public much. And when you talk to Memphis Grizzlies fans, they always talk about how their owner is like an absentee owner. He doesn't really go to games. He's not in Memphis much. They honestly are grateful that he hasn't tried to move the team, and they're grateful that he says he would pay the tax if they needed to hire some great players or sign some great new players. But he's a pretty low key guy, and we didn't get a comment from them.
You in talking about the public company, this being a public company, there's a header right at the beginning of the article that I feel like we should mention, where it says, based on Hunterbrook Media's reporting, Hunterbrook Capital is short dollar UI, and then long a basket of comparable securities at the time of the publication. Can you explain what that means in this context? Real quick?
100%. So Hunterbrook is a new way to fund investigative reporting. It's a kind of crazy company that I run. And the idea is it's basically a big bet that the truth still has some value. That if you hire really good journalists, really good former Intel analysts, people like this, they can go figure out base reality about the world. And that once you understand what's going on in the world, you can make money from that in a bunch of different ways. So we have our newsroom that has its own process and goes into investigations, not knowing what it's going to find. And sometimes we publish an article and there's no disclosed position. But other times, if we have an article we think might be interesting or might be material, we can share it with this affiliated business we have, Hunterbrook Capital, that can take positions in the market, long or short, based on our reporting. And then we disclose all of that. We've also got an affiliated business called Hunterbrook Law that can turn our reporting into litigation. And the idea here is there's almost no investigative reporters left. And that's because all these other industries have captured the value of investigative reporting for a very long time. And we figured if we're finding all this valuable information, the profits from that might as well get reinvested into the journalism. And so that's the disclosure that we made on this article about Ubiquiti. Each of our articles comes with a disclosure. So when you read our articles, you don't just know what we know and how we know it, you know how we stand to make money from it. And so you don't have to ask what's going on here, what are their motives, who's secretly funding them. We just tell everyone, and it's kind of a radical idea, but people really respond to the transparency and the truth. And across a couple hundred articles we've published, there haven't been any meaningful corrections. We haven't had anyone point out a story we got fundamentally wrong. And that's because the newsroom's North Star is just the truth, since that's how we make money.
I mean, that's fascinating because clearly that people can jump right to, well, you stand to make money or your organization stands to make money based on, so shorting the position would mean you're expecting their stock value to fall.
I'm not, I don't run the capital business. And so who's to say? But I just know that this company is an American company whose products are ending up all over the battlefield in Russia and being used in drone strikes. And so that's the story that our team obviously spent these months on. And for whatever reason, obviously, we then disclosed Hunterbrook Capital went short. But I think it's pretty clear, and over time it'll be increasingly clear, that the facts in this story are unquestionable. The only question is, what's Ubiquiti going to do about it? What's the government going to do about it? And what's the NBA going to do about it?
So what I was going to add there was I see how that could be a place for people to try to poke and prod. But another way to look at that is showing the confidence in your reporting of here it is. And just so you know, there's a financial position on the line here. We're so confident.
Totally. I mean, Hunterbrook is in some ways an exercise of putting your money where your mouth is. A lot of people talk, but when Hunterbrook reports, the various other aspects of Hunterbrook's organization takes actions based on that reporting. So I absolutely agree.
Well, this is incredible, Sam. We'll link, of course, the report in the description below, your website, your newsletter, YouTube channel, where people can follow up with everything you're doing. But look, man, beyond just being like a really cool story, this is really important too. There's literally lives on the line, and you guys are stepping in there, and that's awesome.
Thank you so much, and I got to tell people the number one thing we want at Hunterbrook is your stories. There's all kinds of crazy shit going on in the world. And if there's a company you've always wondered, are they secretly evil? I think the strange things going on. If there's something that doesn't make sense about the world, some glitch in the matrix, you can write us at ideas@hunterbrook.com. The link will be on the show. And I'd love to hear what stories you think we should go find next. And in the meantime, please speak out and let Ubiquiti know that they should probably build a compliance function now that they're a $30 billion company. Thank you, Preston, for the time. Thank you for sharing the story and highlighting it. And hopefully we'll be able to make a little bit of a difference here. So thank you.
Absolutely, Sam. Talk soon.
Thanks.
All right, so thank you so much to Sam for taking the time to walk through all that. And of course, thank you to the Hunterbrook team. That's some incredible investigative reporting that really should be pretty shocking to all of us here in the United States. This is a company bypassing U.S. laws so they can profit, and in the meantime, their technology is being used to kill Ukrainians in that war. That's wild, right? And hopefully something actually comes of this. Now, I mentioned earlier, but in the description below, a couple links you're going to want to check out. Of course, reach out to Sam and his team if you've got a story, something they should dig into. We've got a YouTube video, 5 minutes on their channel. Great summary. You can watch it before or after this video. And it goes into a lot of really important detail about this investigation that we may or may not have gotten to during the course of this conversation. Of course, you can subscribe to their newsletter, and then the original report will be there as well. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.